you. Audrey will share with you today and in the next session, as the second part of this session, different tips and tricks on how you can attract more customers to your website with the help of SEO practices. And she will also provide you some insights about the basics of the keyword strategy, how you can use SEO tools, and which practices should be avoided in the SEO activity. So I give the floor to my colleague Ina to introduce or to remind you some technical moments, and we can start.
Thank you, Natalia. Good morning to all of you. Good morning, Audrey, once again. We would like just to remind all of you that on Zoom platform, as it has been already mentioned, you have at your disposal the translation services. Since there are some technical limitations, please consider that in case you want to hear the translation from English to Romanian and from Romanian to English, we kindly ask you to access the button from the Spanish language. So basically, when you access the Spanish button, it is Romanian over there. And at the same time, for the Ukrainian counterparts, we have the translation from English to Ukrainian. And for that, please access the Russian button. And with this being said, we want to remind you once again that by giving consent to participate at this webinar, you all agree for the collection of your data and for the recording of the video, as well as for the taking of the photos for the purpose of marketing. So Audrey, we have ended the introductive part from the technical point of view. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you also to Antrim for organizing this. So as was mentioned, my name is Audrey Scott. As you might guess from my accent, if you were listening to the English version, I'm from the United States originally, but I currently live in Berlin, Germany. So I'm coming to you today from a very cold and dark day in Berlin. And I am working as the tourism and marketing advisor for the Moldova Competitiveness Transition Activity funded by USAID. And I'm very fortunate to work with the team at Antrim, and I was able to meet a few of you, I believe, on my last trip to Moldova. So I was there middle of early November. So it was nice to be able to actually see some of the activities and some of the work that's being done and meet everyone. So as I get my slides ready, in the chat, if you just want to say hello and where you're signing in from today, because I know we have a group from Moldova, we have a group from Ukraine, and also when you think about search engine optimization or SEO, how well do you know it? So think of 5 as I'm an expert, maybe I don't need to be here. 1 is I know nothing at all, I don't know what it means. And if you could just put that in the chat, then that'll be great. I'll get to know where you're coming from and also your level of knowledge about SEO. So can you see the screen? Yeah, okay. Let me see if I can get my chat up so I can see as well. So today we're going to be talking about search engine optimization, and this is a huge topic, and we only have 45 minutes. So this is really going to be a sort of overview of best practices, and it's going to get into keywords a little bit, which is a very important part of search engine optimization. But we are going to have a second part of this, probably end of January, early February, where we'll be going into more details on that. So as of today's goals, we have, in terms of search engine optimization, it's about driving the right traffic to your website via search. And what that really means in basic terms, it's that your potential customers actually find your website. And not only do they find your website on search, but they actually act and they book and they become actual customers. So what we're going to learn today is what SEO is, or search engine optimization, and why it's important. The basics of on-page and off-page SEO, and we're going to be focusing mainly on the on-page, how to optimize your content for search, and where and how to incorporate your keywords. So we're going to look a little bit in terms of how to find keywords and where to incorporate it into your website and into your content. But first, before we go into all of this, what is SEO? It's a word that's used a lot. Search engine optimization is thrown around in a lot of different marketing contexts. And it's about matching searcher intent with the right content. And I'm going to emphasize this idea of searcher intent because this is something that Google is focusing on a lot. What they want is to make sure that the searcher, whoever is going into Google, your potential customer, that it's all about them. The customer is king. And so when Google defines searcher intent, they define it as the need that the user wants to be solved. And so in all of that we're going to be talking about today, we need to start thinking in the mind of the searcher, of the user, and basically your potential customer. So in some respects, it's not about you anymore. It is in terms of your offerings. But as we think about SEO, it's about understanding your customer and understanding them as a searcher, and then how to optimize your content so those two things match up. And so another thing is, in terms of this little screenshot here, in terms of what to do in Moldova, it is quite interesting always to see when you type something into search, what are the other related terms that come up. So when I typed in what to do in Moldova, another thing that came up was what not to do in Moldova. And these are actually kind of tools that can be used to say, oh, these are other things that my potential customers might be searching for. Maybe I should create some content around that because this is an important question that they have. But we'll be going into that a little bit more. So in terms of more details, search engine optimization as a practice. It's basically about increasing the quantity and the quality. And this is really important. The quality aspect means that these are your target customers, because you don't want to attract traffic who have no interest in going to Moldova or have no interest in going to Ukraine. I mean, all of you are a business. You want to make sure that you're able to sell your products, your services. So you want to attract the quality traffic, but you also want to attract quantity, meaning you want to reach as many customers or potential customers as possible. So the quality here is about bringing in relevant traffic, people who are interested in wine tours, people who are interested in cultural immersion, heritage tours. And quantity is that there's enough coming in, so that way a certain percentage are actually booking. And also another important thing to understand about search engine optimization is that this is about organic search results. And what that means is that these are not paid. So paid advertising on Google is a completely different topic, which we're not going to talk about today. And organic means this is what happens naturally. So you're not paying anything extra, and everything that I'm going to cover today is basically free. It takes some time, it takes some energy, but it is free. All the tools that I'm going to be mentioning, there are free versions. So the idea with this is that I'm going to give an overview, but it shouldn't cost a lot of money to figure out, to use these tools, because most of them are free. But it takes some time to optimize and to learn and to practice and to research. So this is actually where search engine optimization can help small businesses, because if they do it well, they can start ranking higher than some of the big businesses. So it's kind of like a secret superpower or tool if it's used well. Now, getting back to the original definition, Google is interested in the searcher. They're not interested in you or your website. They're only there to serve the person who is searching on Google. And so people use Google because it answers a question. They have a burning desire, what do I do in Moldova? What are the best day trips from Odessa? They have some interest and they want an answer to their question. Or it solves a problem. How do I book a winery tour? Does it take reservations? How do I get to Chisinau? Are there direct flights? So these are the two concepts to think about when you're thinking about search about your potential customers. Is often they're going to Google because they have a question they want solved. They have a problem that needs answering. And also, as I mentioned, Google does not owe your company any traffic. Just because you have a website doesn't mean that Google is going to love it. But what we're going to do today is we're going to look at ways to have Google love your website even more, and for you to earn that traffic. And earning that traffic means creating content and creating a website that helps to answer questions, helps solve problems, and helps create that confidence and interest in your potential customer that they want to book with you. And also, just to note, I am using Google here, but the same thing applies for any search engine. So that might be Yandex, Bing, Ecosia, DuckDuckGo. Google has, I think, 87% of the world's share of search traffic. So I'm going to focus on that. They also have very sophisticated algorithms. So that is why I'm using Google here, but you can replace that with other search engines because they all have similar algorithms and similar ways of operating. The most important thing to think about is they're focused on the searcher and helping the searcher get the information they need and trustworthy information and quality information. And that's where your website can fill that need. So you might be thinking, well, does SEO even really matter? Is it really that important? And there's been some recent studies that show that when a website appears in the top 3 listings in Google, it tends to get about 75% of the clicks. Like, many people are lazy. They kind of look at the first one, maybe the second one, third one. If you're someone like me, and I know SEO, so I know some of the games, I tend to go down further on the list, maybe 8, 9. Sometimes I go to page 2. But in general, most people look at the first few listings. And I don't say this to be discouraging. I say this to be, to offer a challenge or a goal, in that when we're talking about SEO, our hope or our goal is to go higher and higher in the search listings. And this means that perhaps your website, if you're a small company, might not be able to compete on some of the really big search terms because you have TripAdvisor, you have Viator, but there's very specific terms that, again, fit the needs of your specific customers that you can rank well for. And the goal with the content you create and the way that your website is organized is to once you know your target customer, is to create the content for them and to do so in a way that is SEO optimized. So that's why SEO is important. And as we mentioned in the last webinar, which was focused on...
Asta a fost apropo în soare în martie.
So the last...
Poate lumea s-a aștepta, știi, că gata și-o.
Oops. So in the last webinar, we were focused on online profiles, and we looked at OTAs, online travel agents like Booking.com, Viator. One of the reasons why SEO is really important is because it allows your website to rank high against those companies as well. So the goal is to get more direct traffic, more direct bookings, which I think is something that we all want as a business, is we want to grab people directly as opposed to going through another website where they might take a commission. So ultimately, that's what we're after with SEO. Now, I shared this slide in the last webinar, and I think it's really important to share again, which is the concept of the traveler journey or the customer life cycle, because, and the role that SEO plays. So at the beginning, we have the discovery and inspiration phase. I sometimes call it the dreaming phase, where maybe someone has seen an article in a favorite magazine about Moldova or Ukraine, or maybe their favorite influencer just traveled there. So they just saw a series of, stories or photos. That's kind of the dreaming phase. It gets the idea in the person's head. And this is also where Antrim plays a big role with their press trips and the international marketing that they're doing. You know, it gets the idea of a place, a vacation, where they want to go in their head. Then comes, wow, Moldova, what do I do there? You know, Ukraine, huge country. Do I go to Odessa? Do I go to Kiev? Are there day trips? And then you get into the planning phase. And this is where people usually go first to Google, is they start searching for things like what to do in Moldova, or, you know, 5-day itinerary in Ukraine or Kiev. And so they start gathering the information in this planning phase. And that's where, you know, blog posts and your websites and also TripAdvisor come in, destination, you know, like Moldova.travel, these websites play an important role. And then the next phase is their booking. You know, they're booking either tours, accommodation, transport. And this is also where SEO plays a big role, because you want to capture those people when they're ready to book as well. So when we think about SEO and the importance it plays, it's really in this planning and booking phase. And ideally we, you know, kind of grab our potential customers in the planning phase and they remember us so that they come back to us in the booking phase when they're ready. They're like, I know my itinerary. I'm going to spend 2 days in Chisinau. I'm going to go wine tasting for 3 days, and then they're ready to book. And your website comes up either offering a tour or perhaps accommodation, or maybe you're a winery and you're selling wine tasting and wine tours. And so this is where SEO can play a really big role. Now, the early days of SEO, they were not very sophisticated. There was what we call keyword stuffing. It was like every few words you would see the same word over and over again. It was, you know, like written for a robot, because the idea was you had to put the same word 10 times in order for Google to understand what your story or what your website was about. And Google really wasn't very sophisticated. You know, they couldn't really tell the difference between kind of high quality content, and they didn't have as many ranking elements for their algorithm. And also companies bought links. You know, I remember the days when I also run a website. I run the travel blog, and I remember getting contacted always by companies trying to buy links, which Google now recognizes, and they penalize both companies. So Google has changed a lot. Now Google is very sophisticated at understanding quality content. They have a lot of different factors to understand, does this content answer questions? Does it solve problems? Are people staying on the site for a long period of time? Are they clicking off quickly? And also Google understands what they call semantic language. So you don't have to say the same keyword over and over again. You know, maybe instead of vacation, you have holiday or trip or tour, because Google understands, okay, all of these words are related. And that's good, because then we can actually write more like humans. And that's what Google wants. Google wants us to write and offer good information, comprehensive information, and not write like we're writing for robots, but that we're writing for humans and we want to help them. So Google really wants you to help your potential customers. The other thing is that page speed and user experience is becoming more and more important, as well as mobile friendly. In fact, Google, I think earlier this year, started ranking sites more in terms of their mobile, kind of mobile first. So this is something we're not going to have a lot of time to go into today, but page speed and making sure that your website is fast, it's easy to navigate, quick to load, it's a good user experience. That's becoming more important in search rankings. So how does Google rank websites these days? And another phrase that I'm going to be using is SERP, which means search engine results page. So that's when you go to Google, you type in something and you see the results. Usually it's 10 on a page. That's the SERP. So it uses web crawlers. So your website regularly is being crawled by Google. And it does that because it wants to understand what your website is about, what your web pages are about. And what information is it providing to searchers? What answers is it giving? What solutions is it providing? And so usually it actually goes from the top down on your page. And this will be important later on, because the idea is you want the most important information on the top. So that way Google understands, as it goes from the top down, it grabs the most important information about what your web page is about, what services it's offering, what solutions it's providing. And now Google's algorithm uses over 200 factors. So it's impossible to optimize for everything. The most important thing that Google always says is provide quality content that helps people, solves their problems, answers the question. And I know that sometimes, Google, if you do a search and you think, oh, these results are awful, it's true, Google's not perfect, but the idea is they're trying to get better at understanding what is it that answers people's questions and how do we rank that higher. So the type of things that go into the rankings include, content, the depth, that it's quality, comprehensive, mobile first, on-page SEO, which is something we're going to be talking about today, social media and buzz. And this is the idea is that if Google sees that a lot of people are mentioning you or talking about you, they'll also say, oh, this is a trustworthy, good website. That's the same with usage signals. If you start appearing in different press or other articles, they're like, oh, people are talking about this website or this company. That signals trust. Speed, which we mentioned a little bit. And also backlinks. And backlinks, we're not going to go into a lot today, but this is the idea that when you get links from, maybe an article's been written about you or a blogger visited and, they wrote about their experience, it's a link back to your website. And it's becoming more important because when it comes from a trusted, authoritative website, it means that your website is authoritative. So Google ranks that quite a lot as well. So there's two kind of SEO, general, on page and off page. And the on page are all the things on your website that impact SEO. So these are all the things that you can control. If you have access to your website and you have control of your website, these are things that you can control. And this is what we're going to focus on mostly today. And this includes keywords, understanding what are the relevant keywords for my target audience, how to include them in content, how to write high quality content. If I'm offering tours, how to make sure I have all the information that a traveler might want, answer all their questions, all their concerns. Titles and subheadings, we're going to go into that a little bit more. This is something that's quite important. And I reviewed several websites as part of the last journal. And I noticed that on some of the company websites that I reviewed, this is something that isn't so strong, meaning there often isn't subheadings or places that allow visitors to kind of scan the page. Meta descriptions, this is another one that is really important and often is overlooked. And these are the things, these are the descriptions that come up in the search snippet, like when you search for something, the little description. Internal linking, this is also something I've noticed is often lacking. Images, you want high quality images, but you don't want huge files because again, page speed is really important. So you want to make sure your images are optimized. They're a small size, they fit the screen. You're not uploading 4 megabit images that you just took, that you're shrinking them down. Page speed and user experience, mobile first, because again, more and more users are using mobile and Google is prioritizing mobile. Now the off page, which we're not going to talk about today so much, but we might next time, is the idea of elements outside your website. So you have some control over this, meaning you can work to get articles written about you, to have press, to have other companies link to your site and you link to their site because it relates. So these are the ideas of when other companies are mentioning you or press or media and you get the links back to your site. So this is an example from Lonely Planet where they were focused on they wrote an article about the new wine routes in Moldova. And so they linked to different websites, I think, including Moldova.travel. So that's a great thing when you can get high quality links like that. Now, keywords. This is something that is going to be mentioned a lot today, and it is kind of at the core of search engine optimization. And so just briefly in terms of what are keywords, it's basically any search term that a user can enter into Google or into search engine. So it's basically any question they might ask, any information that they need about a specific topic. And a keyword, even though often it's keyword as in singular. Often a keyword is multiple words together, like what to do in Moldova or day trips from Chisinau. So even though it's we call it a keyword, it often is actually a phrase. And this is important because more and more searchers are typing longer things into Google. So it's getting more specific. And this is an opportunity, especially for small businesses, to be able to rank for those more specific terms and those more specific keywords. So instead of trying to rank for something huge like Moldova, the idea is to start ranking for things like wine tours, wine day trips from Chisinau, things like that that are a bit longer. And so keywords are really at the core of this search intent. What are your potential customers searching for? What are their needs? What are their interests in terms of traveling to your destinations? And it's at the intersection of your offerings. What are your services? What are your tours? Kind of what are your products that you're selling or that your website is about? And connecting that with your website content. Because you have your products, you have your company offerings, but then you need to translate that into website content that also matches what your target market is looking for, your target customers. And so this means that you really need to know your buyer persona. So you need to know your target customers well. What are their pain points? What are they concerned about? What are their dreams? How can you make that happen? And in terms of website content is hard. Anyone who has built a website knows that this is much harder than the technical aspect. So writing kind of high quality, organized, clear, comprehensive content to match what your potential customers are searching for on Google and how that connects with your offerings it's not easy, but it's possible. It takes practice, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is kind of how to connect those things. But keywords are really at the center of all of this. And we're going to go into how to find and search for keywords at the end. But first, we're going to go over a bit more of the on-page SEO, and then we're going to see how to get keywords to incorporate into all these different elements. So in the back end, so these are the things that you have control over. They're on-page SEO, but the user, the visitor to your website probably won't see them directly. And that's the metadata. And metadata basically tells Google what your web page is about. So that means the meta title, the official technical title, and the meta description, and the URL. So these are all things that you have control over. And depending upon which platform your website is on, it might be in a different place, meaning if you use WordPress, there's Yoast, which is a great free plugin that has a section at the bottom of each page that allows you to put in your meta title, put in your meta description, and there might be other website you might be using a different platform. So the idea is to find out where can you add in this information, because if you don't add it in, Google will find it, or they'll find a way. They're going to figure out something to put in that search snippet. And sometimes it's not so great, meaning sometimes they start from the top down and you have something at the top of the page that really is not that related. Like there's a hotel in Chisinau that has a beautiful quote at the top of their page, but it doesn't really tell a potential visitor, like, this is a hotel in Chisinau and what type of rooms do they have and what's the style and do I want to live, would I want to stay there? So I mentioned this because when I was reviewing websites before, many pages had titles, the page has a title, but many pages do not have meta descriptions that were added. And this is really an easy way, or one of the ways to tell Google what your page is about and also what your potential customers want. And so this allows them to understand exactly what you're offering and why it's unique. And think about when you do a search yourself, often you're looking at the titles and you're looking at the meta description and you want to make sure that it fits. So this is also a way that even if you rank well on Google, you want to make sure that people are clicking through to your website. So it's important to add your keywords to this and make these clear so that way Google understands what your page is about, what it's offering, and also potential visitors understand. And the other thing with URLs, kind of your web link, is also to make sure that it includes your keywords. This is also something that I noticed in some of the websites I reviewed, is it would just have kind of like / and a series of numbers, 37654. Ideally, it says, tours / wine tours Chisinau or wine tours Kodru, So the idea is that you want your URL to actually tell people what that page is about or what it's offering. Now, on-page keyword placement. We're going to go into this a little bit more in the next journal, but just very briefly, there's a couple of key places where you need to make sure your keyword is included on your web pages. And this is in the header or the title. So sometimes I've noticed that people have very poetic and beautiful titles of their website pages, but they don't really tell me as a visitor what's it about, and they don't tell Google what's it about. So I think the idea is to, you want to keep that poetic tone, but when it comes to the title, be maybe a little bit more direct as to that's what this page is about, or this is the information you're going to get here, because that'll help the user, the visitor, understand what it's about, and it'll help Google understand what it's about. So the header and the title, then the description at the top of the page. Often there's a description or a summary paragraph at the top of the page. This is also an important thing to make sure that you have. And I mention that because I've seen a lot of websites that do not really have much text at the top of the page. And remember, Google tends to scan from the top down to look for the most important information. So to have text or to have a description at the top is really important. And then the body copy or the main content. And the first 2 or 3 sentences are most important because, again, not only is Google reading from the top down, but also your visitors often have short-term attention spans. So they're reading from the top down as well. And this is what gives you the context in the first paragraph. So here's just an example from G Adventures, a company that we've done a lot of work with, and it's about hiking the Inca Trail. So you can see how variations of hiking the Inca Trail are in the title, description, and the main text. Now, in terms of another, I wouldn't say easy, but something that you can look at your web pages and kind of think, okay, how can I adjust my format to make it easier for visitors to read and also easier for Google to understand? And one of the ways to do that is to use subheadings. And if you're using WordPress or some other website platforms, this is called like an H2. H2 is the main subheading, then you have H3, which is less important. And it's important because Google takes its information, kind of what are the most important parts from these subheadings. And also readers, we tend now, when we're reading information online, we scan. We look at like, what are the big font? What are the things in color? And we use that as a way to understand what's this page about and what's relevant for me. So this is an example from a colleague of mine who actually works as an SEO expert, where she has a really long guide on her website for Georgia, but she's broken it down into different subheadings. So this one's Tbilisi, the one that is even kind of underneath that is things to do in Tbilisi. So that's H3. But then she also knows that best day trips from Tbilisi is a really popular search term. So she's added that as an H2 because she wants to make sure that Google knows, like, I'm providing information about this popular search term. So when you're thinking about the content on your own page, think about how you can break it down into these subsections with subheadings that highlight the most important parts for your user, or for your visitor, your potential customer, but also for Google. Another really important thing that is often overlooked, and I noticed this when I was reviewing websites last week, is internal linking. This is when you link to other pages within your website. And the reason why it's important is because from an SEO's perspective, it's important because Google will look at all the internal linking and say, oh, how is all this connected? This website is an authority on this topic, or this website is about these types of services. And I can tell that because it's linking to all these pages and they create kind of this ecosystem of related pages. The other reason why is it's good for visitors. I mean, often you want your visitors, your potential customers, to stay on your page as long as possible, because the longer they're on the page, ideally, the more likely they are to book something. So you want to send them to related content. You know, maybe they originally found your page because they were looking up something about Moldovan food, but then you link to another page, which is about wine tours, and they go to that page, and then they're like, oh, I can go hiking near the wine tours, and then they go to that page. So it's important to link internally within your website for related pages. And one rule of thumb is to link at least 3 times to internal pages within your website content. And so here's an example from a project a couple of years ago from a town in Kyrgyzstan, in Eastern Kyrgyzstan, Karakol. And you can see from all the blue, these are the internal linkings to other pages to kind of direct people to those. And it wasn't just linking kind of one word. You know, sometimes it's, you know, connected to, you know, food and cultural tours, historical sites, outdoor experiences. And so the idea is, again, to direct people those interests to those pages as well. So it's good for visitors, it's good for Google. Now we're going to get into a little bit in terms of keywords, how to find your keywords. And the first recommendation I would say is think about what keyword you want to rank for, or think about what keyword you think your website ranks for, or you think your website should rank for, and go to Google and go to an incognito window, and also make sure you go to the country where your target market is in. And the reason why I say that is if you don't go to an incognito or private window, then Google already has your search history and they will serve up what they think you want. So if you go to a private window and also go to the country that your target market is in, and then search for that search term and see, A, does my website appear? And B, if it doesn't, what are the types of websites and what is the type of content that is appearing for that targeted search term? And how can I adjust my content in a similar way? Or maybe this isn't the right keyword for me. Maybe my target market really isn't this. So that's, a lot of people miss this step, but it's really important to Google and to do your own experimentation yourself. Now, when it comes to travel, there are companies like TripAdvisor, Viator, Get Your Guide, Booking.com. They have huge budgets and they often appear at the top of search results. I'm sorry to say that, but it's just the truth. However, many travelers often ignore them because it's kind of like they want to go direct. So even if you can't compete with TripAdvisor, you still want to get as high up on the page. So for example, this was a search for wine tours in Moldova, and you had winetours.md show up just below TripAdvisor and Viator, which is great. One of the challenges is their meta description is in Russian, which if I'm searching in English is a bit confusing. So these are the things to look for: is how does my company's website appear, and what is the meta description and title, and what does it look like? Now, one of the tools that I'm going to mention, and this whole topic could be like a month-long course, so this is very quick, and we're going to cover a bit more in the next journal, is SEMrush. So SEMrush.com, and it's an expensive tool, but they have a free version, and the free version allows you, I think it's 10 searches per day, so you can kind of divide it out day by day. And they have different assets. If you want to go very much into it, it's very complicated, but there's some very specific, simple things that you can use from the beginning. One of them is called this keyword magic tool. And the idea is you put in, a keyword. I put in Moldova tour, which is a big kind of broad search term. But the other important thing is you can select your desired country or target market. So for me, it was United States, but you can also do Russia, Ukraine, Romania, Moldova, Germany. And that's important because it'll give you more specific information from those markets. And here you can see the different types of keywords and related to that Moldova tour. So in addition to just, actually capital tour Moldova ends up ranking higher than Moldova tour, not ranking higher, but it has more search volume. So here it's useful because you sometimes might have a keyword in your head and then you realize, oh, there's actually other related keywords that have more volume, meaning more people are searching for it. That might be better for me to go for, or that might be better for me to incorporate into my content, in my titles, into my meta description. So it's this idea of getting you thinking, like Moldova city tour. Again, this, if you're offering Chisinau tours, maybe the idea is instead in addition to saying that this is a Chisinau tour, you also call it a Moldova city tour, because again, people are searching for this. Or Moldova tour guide, you're offering your tour company, but you also have Moldovan tour guides as well. So you can incorporate these keywords into your content, and especially the ones at the top of the page, at the top, the descriptions. Now, there's also this idea of, let's see, this was the keyword magic tool. Similar to this is the keyword overview. So this is again, Moldova tours. And what's important, as I mentioned in the last one, is the volume, because you want to choose something that people are actually searching for. But also the KD percentage is shows the difficulty. So if you're a small site, if you're a young site, you don't necessarily want to compete on a keyword that's really difficult, because it's going to be harder for you to rank. So the idea is to look at the keywords available in terms of volume. Again, you want to make sure people are searching for it, but also the difficulty, that it's something that you can actually rank for, that you have an ability to move higher in search. The other thing to think about when you're using these tools is it gets you thinking of different keywords, or how you can adjust your keywords. So this is again, this was actually a search related to Moldova travel. So what was interesting is, in addition to Moldova travel, which has volume of 320, is Moldova travel safety was the next highest. And so that means if I were creating a website related to travel to Moldova, I probably would have a page dedicated to Moldova travel safety. This is something people are searching for. It's something that maybe they're concerned about, that relates to what is it like traveling to Moldova, maybe as a single woman, as a family, is it dangerous? What happens if something does happen? And so these are the different ideas to think about. Now, another important aspect is this related keywords. So, Moldova vacation, that's targeting Americans. We tend to use vacation more than holidays. So if your target market is Americans, then maybe you want to start incorporating Moldova vacation more into your website pages, or visit Moldova instead of Moldova travel. So these are all, I'm going over this very quickly, but just to give you some ideas of ways you can use these tools and ways to start looking at the content on your page, to how you can adjust it for these different keywords in terms of volume, but also difficulty. Now, one way to check, you might be saying, well, I have no idea what my website, like what keywords my website ranks for. So there's, again, a couple of free tools. This is, again, SEMrush, so it's part of their free offer, as long as you use less than 10 searches a day. And it's something called domain overview. So you can put in a domain. It will tell you kind of your authority score. It will also tell you your top organic keywords. So what Google thinks your website is about. So often these are related. Like if Google thinks your website is about, caracol in this case, that's one of the top keywords. And it will also tell you the position, so how you're ranking. So this is like number 2. The other thing is, what's also quite interesting is it'll tell you your main organic competitors. So who are the other websites that have similar keywords to you that you're competing against? And one thing to do is to check out your competitors. What are their websites like? What's their content like? How can you make your content stand out even more? How can it answer questions and solve problems and offer solutions even better than your competitors? So again, this is just a way to understand, my website, what is it ranking for? What are the keywords? Because it might be that you didn't even think about keywords when you set it up, but now is an opportunity to do so. And Google Search Console, again, another free tool. You can also put in, if you haven't signed up for it, you should. You can also put in, you connect it to your website, and it will also tell you under queries, what are the top queries. And what's important is not just the number of clicks, but also the impressions. So the impressions are how many people are kind of viewing that, that term or that keyword. So what you want is you want a keyword that has a lot of impressions. And that way, if you say, oh, this keyword has a lot of impressions, but not many people are clicking, then that means I have some work to do to optimize my web page for that. And finally, before I get to the checklist, because I realize I'm beginning to run out of time and I do want to take questions, is page speed and user experience. Again, this is becoming more and more important in Google. It likes fast loading. It likes simple websites. One of my SEO expert friends likes to say, useful is better than beautiful when it comes to SEO. So I know a lot of us like these kind of very big shiny websites, but often when it comes to SEO, making sure that your information is clear and comprehensive and fast is even more important. And with page speed, which is a tool that Google provides, it's free, you can put in your website and see how you perform. And what's important is not only to see how you perform on desktop, but also how you perform on mobile, because that will, again, Google's prioritizing mobile more and more. And when you do this, don't be depressed. I mean, sometimes you'll go in and be like, oh my God, I'm red or I'm yellow. But the idea is to go down and understand what are the easy wins. Often it's things related to your images, making sure that your files are optimized. And it's just understanding, okay, what are the things that are slowing my website down, and start thinking, how can I address these topics? Another good resource is GTmetrix, where again, they'll give you, this is just a snippet from the top, but they give you a lot of scores to go down on the page, and where you can see, okay, what's slowing my page down? Maybe I need to think about some more things. And so this is kind of a summary, a quick, you'll receive this in the follow-up newsletter, and you also receive some more links to the things that I just talked about. But as you think about your own website and your web pages, and one thing that I want to emphasize is Google ranks web pages. They don't rank websites. So that means that you have an opportunity with every page on your website to optimize it and to rank. It doesn't just have to be the home page. So this is a great thing, because you can really target specific keywords and specific target customers. So do your pages have meta titles, meta descriptions? Does your URL make sense, your link? Does your website have a clear title, a clear description at the top that really explains what this page is about, what you're going to get, why I should continue reading, tells Google what this is about and what problems it solves, and that you have comprehensive content that, again, answers that question, provides a service, a solution. Are your websites structured with subheadings to organize and break it up? Are you linking to at least 3 internal pages on each of your web pages? Have you analyzed the keywords that you want your site to rank for? And again, this is a huge topic, so we're going to go into this more in the next journal in 2022. And is your website quick to load and mobile friendly? So those are, the things to start thinking about. And I realize right now you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming. But the idea is to just start with one page on your website and go through each of these things. And I'm actually going to give you some homework to do that, so that way you're prepared for the next journal in 2022. But before then, here are just some of the useful tools mentioned. And again, you'll receive this in an email form in the newsletter, hopefully next week, with links to all of these things, as well as some additional ones. And some of the ones that I mentioned were SEMrush, Google Search Console, Google Page Speed, GTmetrix, SEO plugin for WordPress, Yoast. They have a paid version, but the free version is completely sufficient for any of your needs. And there's also some useful browsers, which I did not go over, which are basically extensions on either Chrome or Firefox, where you can analyze a page and say, okay, do I have H2 subheadings? What keywords? So I'll include those in the newsletter as well. And then now is your homework. And obviously this is voluntary, but if you want to make the most of this and also prepare for the next journal, choose a web page, ideally choose 2 or 3 from your website, and optimize it for SEO. So that means kind of going over the checklist that I just mentioned. So choosing a target keyword or phrase for your page, And there can be several. You should have a main one, but then you should have related ones because again, they all support the same idea. That you actually have written in your metadata. You have a meta title, you have a meta description. So Google isn't just grabbing what it wants, but you've told it, what this page is about and includes the keywords. That your content, especially the first 1 to 3 sentences, include these keywords and tell people what this page is about. What are they going to get if they continue reading? And you tell Google the same thing. What information is provided? You break up your content into several subheadings. Obviously, it depends on how long your content is, but either H2 or H3, which are the main subheadings. You would link to at least 3 other pages on your website from your text. And you check your page speed on either GTmetrix or Google Developer just to see kind of what improvements, what easy wins could I make? If I change the image size of my website, will that make a difference? So those are kind of the homework if you choose. And with the next one, if you do choose to do this, it would be great to let me know in advance of the next web journal what you've done, so I can also perhaps take a look as well to see how it was optimized and what maybe more could be done. So with that, I realize I went a little bit over. It's a lot of information, and if you're willing to stay a few more minutes, I'd be happy to take any questions you have. Also, there is an opportunity for, this was the same thing with the last journal, to review kind of a quick review of a web page, not a whole website, but a web page, looking at the questions that I just put in the last slide in terms of keywords, in terms of structure, in terms of titles, metadata. And for the last journal, those of you who were one of the participants for the review, you will be getting that in the next couple of days. I apologize, it's taken so long. I actually visited Moldova with some other projects, but you'll be getting those in the next few days as well. And some of that feedback actually relates to what we're talking about today. So I will take any questions. I will close my screen at this point and feel free to ask them in the chat or speak them out loud. So thank you.
Thank you very much for this very exhaustive presentation.
Yeah, it's a lot. I tried to fit a lot in, but for everyone who's here, if it feels very overwhelming, you'll be getting a copy of the slides translated, into either Romanian or Ukrainian. So you'll be able to hopefully digest it a little bit more. I just wanted, yeah, it's a lot.
But the best part is that you managed to cover quite a lot of questions which actually were addressed in the forums before we started the journal.
That's great. So yeah, perfect. So if there are any questions, we have our fabulous interpreters here to help because my Romanian is non-existent and same with my Ukrainian. So yeah.
Anyone who wants to take the lead and ask something maybe you're worried about in regards to SEO, or maybe there are some questions which arose following the presentation that Audrey successfully did. I will also check on Facebook. Maybe there are some questions over there.
And yes, I did present a lot of information. It might feel overwhelming, but that's why I suggested just starting with one page on your website. Just look at one page and say, okay, I'm putting on my SEO hat. I'm going to go through these questions. And then from there, then you can go to the next page and then look at it as a whole.
So far, we don't have questions, only congratulations.
I did receive a private message, and Veronica, I hope it's okay if I share this with the group because I think it's relevant. And that's related to SEO for images. I did not go into that in this webinar because, again, just so much information. I was planning on doing it in the next journal. But yes, SEO for images is really important. And what that means is that when you upload an image to your website, you make sure that the file name is relevant. So not just 12345.jpg, but it says, I don't know, Chisinau-food-tour. So that way people know, or Google knows, this is what this image is about. And then also there is something called an alt tag. And that alt tag, you should also put a description of what that image is, again, with keywords, because not only is that good for Google, usually it reads images, not by the image, but it reads it by the alt tag. And it will then serve up those images in Google image search. But that alt tag is also good for people who have disabilities, because people who are using screen readers, they, who are blind, they can't see that image, but if you have an alt tag, then their screen reader will tell them what that image is about. So it's good for both things. So great question, Veronica. I hope it's okay that I answered it in the group. So yes, SEO for images is also very important.
No questions.
maybe I overwhelmed people.
Maybe everything is crystal clear, but I think
this is just the beginning.
Yes.
Audrey, I wanted to ask one question. I wanted to know your recommendation related to the staff personnel. Should we teach somebody from our employees to be specialists for search engine optimization, or should we use services of some company which will provide search engine optimization for our web page? What is better? Because I think it is a lot of work, it is a lot of experience, and these people should be skilled to do this work. What do you think? What is better for us?
So, very good question, and there's no right answer or exact answer. For me personally, I like having someone on the staff who is maybe not an SEO expert, but is familiar with SEO. Because that way, if you want to make changes to your website, you don't have to get someone from the outside. You can do it yourself. However, hiring an expert is useful for audits. So for example, to hire an expert who does an audit of your page and say, here are my recommendations, and here's where I think, the keywords you should go for. But in the end, it's going to have to be your staff who's writing. Well, usually it's your staff that's writing the content and implementing it. So I think having someone on the team who has some experience or some knowledge in SEO is useful. But for a whole new strategy, then perhaps hiring an expert, not continually, like not on a monthly contract, but for a specific project, and then to work with your team to implement it. So
super.
Yeah, no problem. Great question. And the other thing is, once you start searching about search engine optimization, there's lots of information in every language. I'll provide in the newsletter some websites that I think that also have different languages that I think are quite useful just for basics, because we're not all going to become SEO experts overnight, but it's just understanding. Part of it's understanding the mentality, the mindset, and then looking at your website in a new way and to say, okay, am I answering searchers' questions? How can I put the most important information at the top? And so I'll provide some more links to that in the newsletter.
Let's make the last call for the questions.
And I'll just put the link to SEMrush in the chat, because you can find it obviously online, but just make sure you sign up for the free version, because the paid version is very expensive. And I believe they also have it in quite a few different languages. So that's probably in Russian. I don't know what other languages it is as well.
I believe if there are no questions, maybe the participants will have some time allocated to process the information which was provided to them. the thing that remained is that I would like to once again say that we are thankful for the support of the USAID EDGE Buy in Moldova Competitiveness Transition activity, with whose support this journal was possible to organize, and to bring thanks to our partner from Ukraine, the Association of Hospitality of Ukraine. And once again, thank you, Audrey, for sharing with your expertise to the representatives from the tourism industry, both from Moldova and from Ukraine. If there are any other questions, we are open to receive them and as soon as possible to respond to them.
So, and thank you for inviting me. And again, I hope this is kind of the beginning stages of this, relationship with SEO. And even though SEO sounds technical, it's again, being human and helping and just making sure those words are at the top, those keywords. So
thank you very much. Goodbye.
Goodbye.